Welcome to another episode of Connect, where we go beyond Sunday. This is your talk show where we integrate the Word of God with real life issues, the issues that you are going through and we are going through. Remember, for those who are listening to us through Parky Radio, and for you who is watching us through this channel, you can engage in this conversation by sending an email to the email provided below, making use of the comment section. We would be glad to hear from you. We would be glad to know your experiences and feedback on how you are engaging with the topic that we have today. We started this episode, Coach Kiriba,
Yes.
talking about money struggles. And I remember saying, putting the word struggle and the word money in the same sentence. Sometimes it may not make sense, or people have different views on that.
Yeah.
But in our last episode, and we are receiving quite a bit of feedback, people who have taken time to evaluate their own lives and identified their area of money struggle. And I know we talked about 4 broad categories
Yes.
of money struggle, areas of struggle. And people have taken that assignment seriously to try and evaluate where are they. Maybe we can do a quick recap before we delve into today's topic,
Yeah.
where we are looking at then how can you overcome these money struggles. A quick recap.
Thank you, Percy. Yes, last week we had, in the last series,
Yes.
rather the session, we had discussed about the money struggles. And one was a floater, then a daredevil, we had a spender, and
The avoider.
the avoider. So those were the 4 categories: the floater, the daredevil, the spender, and the avoider.
Yes.
And of course, you can find that you have most of those struggles, but there is a predominant one. There is one
Yes.
that you find, this is the struggle that I'm really having. And the floater, we had talked about, this person is a person who lives paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
The paycheck might be a daily person who is paid on a daily basis, might be a hawker or a person who runs a shop. So they look at the daily earnings. It can be someone who is paid weekly. Again, depending on the places or environments, the people are paid on a weekly basis. So they live that week at a time, or a monthly basis. But the moment that paycheck is cut off, they sink because they live one day at a time. But they are struggling because year in, year out, if you go 3 years later, 10 years, they're still surviving because they're not making headway. And the second person was the daredevil. They're a person who they're living out of their means. They are not struggling with the paycheck, but they are getting into debt. They are acquiring what they call assets, yet they're not assets. They are getting into debt to be able to enjoy life, which is not within their means. And so the moment they get into that, they are the devil of debt who can kill them. Then you have the spender, the people who have an appetite for spending. They are just triggered. When money comes in, there are calls from outside, their appetite, their triggers were asking them, can we spend? And there's the avoider, a person who is not ready to confront the issue that they are in. They know they're in struggle, they're in an issue, especially the debt issue, but they're not ready to face it and to say, how can I get out of it? So those were the 4 money struggles.
And when I look at those 4 categories, I realize they cut across. They cut across, being in lack, having maybe a moderate income, or even having excess in terms of income.
Yes.
The other aspect is I also see these 4 people from a different perspective. The floater really is this person who is not growing. They are not necessarily going down, but they are not going up.
Yes.
They are just somewhere.
Yeah.
But the risk is that they face a higher risk of going down
Yes. We're just an event
than of going up.
Yeah.
Or rather than the benefit of going up. This guy who is a daredevil is somebody who spends money that they don't have.
They're ambitious people. But now they spend money they don't have.
They don't have.
They are not aware of the risk they are getting themselves into by acquiring a lifestyle which is not within what they can live within.
And I think there is a time you can spend money that you don't have, but there should be, it should be within a certain context.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what we will be addressing today.
Yes.
The spender is this person who doesn't grow, yet they have money, because their life, their money is revolves around spending. Now, the avoider is this fellow who has already sunk into chronic money problems.
And they are probably yielded to that fate.
But the biggest challenge is that they are not willing
to
face this. I think from the onset, we want our listeners and our viewers to know that there is hope. There is hope regardless of what your money struggles are.
Yeah.
And just to remind them, there is a verse in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17 to 19, and there is something it touches which I would like to bring right at this point as we now start putting our faith into perspective and our minds into perspective on how we can handle these 4 areas of struggle. And it says, instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. And then he says, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Then Paul says, instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is life indeed.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a very rich scripture. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17 to 19. And though specifically Paul is telling Timothy to address the rich, but the principles that he's using and going by the 4 categories that we have identified, I see that the principles that can come out of this verse can actually apply across the 4 categories of struggles. And 3 things that come out for me in this scripture is our hope. So whether you are struggling because you have plenty or because of scarcity, to remember that our hope is in God. That is very key. And that then changes the way we actually think about money, but also our supply. He says it is God who supplies. And God is generous. In fact, Paul is saying this God who supplies everything for our enjoyment.
For enjoyment.
Yeah, for our enjoyment.
Not just needs.
Yeah, it's not just needs. It's not just... So there is that freedom that really God supplies. We have our supplier who is God. But I think the other thing that Paul is also mentioning here is our attitude. And I think that's what you will be delving quite a bit on. Our attitude, first of all, he talks about an attitude of generosity. And I think if anyone is going to be generous, one of the things they must overcome is self-centeredness. And I think then the aspect of being generous, when you are generous to others, you are actually being generous to yourself. How does all this then try to speak into the 4 categories of money struggles that we have seen, and how can we face them head on, starting with the floater? Can the floater stop floating and not sink?
Thank you. The floater, this person who lives paycheck to paycheck. They're actually thinking of money for self and money to survive, to pay their food, shelter, and clothing and transport. They can be best addressed, or they can solve their money issues or their money struggles by now opening an opportunity for a savings kitty. Because this person will struggle and they'll always complain. It's 5 years later. When I look back, I have not moved. I'm just floating in the same space in the pool or in the lake that I was in, while others have made milestones, have not moved. Why? It's because all the money they were earning was basically all going into spending. Now it is for them to realize, sit down in their budget, they reorganize their spending. Remember, we had mentioned about the expenses, so that they're able to have a budget for saving. And they become very intentional, and they become very disciplined to making sure of whatever I earn, there's a saving towards it. I'll not give a percentage. Of course, there are many principles, 10%, 20%, 30% of whatever you earn. But the most important place to start from is that I pay myself first. Before I pay all my bills and you're paying others, you're paying the government before money gets to you. You pay your tithes, you pay your landlord, you pay your transport service provider, whether it's matatu or it's your fuel, then you leave yourself without anything. So it is for that first to remember, for me not to float, it is by myself growing. And the way to grow is to save, to put money aside for my growth, so that I'm able to see growth, whether it's in my asset, whether it's in my lifestyle, whether it's in my progress in terms of the enjoyment that God has asked of me. So a discipline and a focus to ensure that of my income, whatever I earn, I'll not just be floating. I'll be putting aside for as a saving, which will help me grow to the next level.
And I think coming to that strategy that you're just talking about, two things come to mind. Number one, we are saying this kind of a person needs to be empowered on their stewardship.
Yes.
And stewardship here, meaning that they need to be looking at growth. You know, the story that is captured in Matthew 25, verse 14 to 18 about the talents. You know, it says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Okay? Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once. You know, that at once really talks about urgency. At once, and put his money to work and gained 5 bags. So also the one with 2 bags, he gained 2 more. Then it talks about this guy. It says, but the one who had received 1 bag, went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. And he just decided to survive. He just decided to stay with what he was given. And he had nothing to give to his master. So empowering yourself in terms of stewardship, empowering yourself for growth. And when you talk, the second aspect I'm saying, when you talk about paying yourself, what I have also heard many people do is paying yourself is maybe getting yourself that suit that you didn't have.
Or a holiday.
Or getting a holiday, or, getting a very heavy breakfast, or whatever it is, some party with friends. Is that what you mean when you say that somebody should pay themselves? Because there is somebody who is very happy. They are wondering, why then don't I get out of this challenge, yet I pay myself every so often?
Paying myself is saving for my tomorrow. Tomorrow, I can be in a discomfort. Tomorrow, I can make a decision. I can make a decision to leave the comfort zone that I'm in, and it will involve some risk. So how do I take care of my tomorrow? We are actually, as you say, now it is basically ensuring that the resources that I have, I'm able to grow them so that in the future I'm able to adjust to enjoy myself in the resources that I'm building. So paying yourself is putting a savings aside, which will grow. You will invest so that you're able to grow better, so that you're able to enjoy even tomorrow. And let me say this, and it's common. Money habits and your money struggles, even as we discuss this, it is 20% knowledge, but 80% change of your behavior. So that floater, the place to start from is to acknowledge, one, give myself a name. I'm a floater. I'm barely surviving. I'm not growing. These are my problems. 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I've not grown. I've just been floating. When you acknowledge that problem, then you see what do I change? Change my behavior. It can be in terms of how I spend. But also let me say this, it cannot, people will argue and say, but what I spend is barely enough to survive. You can adjust your income. And there are very many avenues of adjusting your income. It can be, if you're in business, you can be able to scale your business. If you are employed, of course, many of the floaters mainly will be people who are on a paycheck, who are salaried. You can negotiate your salary to your employer. I actually have a good friend of mine who was our service provider, and her diligence, I looked, and we had just a discussion. You're saying I'm struggling, and I felt at her role she should be, when we discussed and she told me what she was being paid, I felt, no, you need to go and negotiate with your employer. Can I tell you something? The truth, she went and negotiated with the employer, and her salary was increased 3 times. Not 50%, not 100%, 200 times, because the employer acknowledged what they are earning. And that is one of the way of moving from a floater, by adjusting your income in terms of your salary increase, and that increase should not again match your spending. Let that increase go into a saving that will grow you to the next level.
But I wish we can all get that kind of an employer where we can renegotiate our salaries 3 times. But yes, stewardship. Yes. You can actually, maybe you are sitting on an opportunity, and your employer doesn't know that you are due for a pay raise.
Yes.
But also, even without that pay rise, look at your income.
Yes.
Restructure it. Restructure the way you are spending your money. And 1 shilling saved today, and another one saved tomorrow, and another one saved the other day, is not equal to 1 shilling not saved for those days that I have mentioned. On the 3rd day, you will have 3 shillings for yourself. If you don't, on the 3rd day, you will still not have the 3 shillings. And by the way, just to throw this as a personal philosophy, and I've been talking to people about saving, and I normally say, if you sit down and look at your income and the way you have spent, and try to account for every shilling, in many cases, you will not fail to find 1,000 shillings that you cannot account for.
That's true.
You really can't tell. So I have a conviction that there are many people who can save at least 1,000 shillings per month.
That's true.
And if you divide that then per day, you will get the equivalent. Yes. Maybe it's some 5 shillings. In a day, even that person who is earning 200 shillings, there are some 5 shillings you just can't tell. Where did it go? And so if this person just decides, before this 5 shillings disappears, I can actually take the initiative of keeping it somewhere where I know where it is. And you will already have started a journey of saving.
Exactly.
How about the daredevil?
The daredevils, as I said, they get into investments, call them, or assets through debt. They are not struggling with month to month, but they live out of their means. One is to acknowledge that they are not living within their means. Number 2 is to be careful and to take a calculated risk when they're acquiring, let's say if it's investments, if you call them, they can be saying, I want to acquire a car, I want to acquire a land somewhere, or in opportunity that they will say, I've gotten an opportunity I want to invest in. So it is first to acknowledge, one, they're living out of their means. It's a word. They live outside their means.
Yes.
So one is to beyond their
means.
They are
living beyond
their means. That is the right word.
Yes.
So one is to sit down and relook at their budget and to see what's my income, what's my expense. They also look at their needs versus wants. They live in their wants a lot, and they fund their wants through debt. So it is to, as much as possible, to try to remove a lot of the wants that are being financed by debt. But also it is for them to learn the habit of, I can acquire an asset through a savings plan. So they can have a plan of, for the next 6 months, for the next 1 year, I'll be putting aside an amount of money that will save enough for me to get a car that can facilitate my level of life. I can be able to save well enough within my circle for me to start towards a home ownership plan. I can save enough for me to be able to adjust to the life that I want.
And so, two things again, very quickly. That number one, reduce on wants.
Yes.
Reduce on wants.
Yes.
But employ a different strategy for the needs.
Yes.
That instead of getting them on loan or, on credit,
Yes.
you can actually save and get them from your own power.
Yes.
And not necessarily borrowed or lended power.
Exactly.
And I think what comes to my mind here from scripture is that this kind of people need to learn something called contentment. And this is enabling them to learn how to put up with the seasons of life. And Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 to 13, Paul speaking to the Philippians says, "Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am." He says, "I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need." And then the famous verse, in this context, he says, "I therefore can do all things through him who strengthens me."
Amazing.
And I'm seeing this strength really being plugged on contentment.
Powerful.
That you can be contented with where you are. It doesn't mean don't be ambitious, but be driven by contentment so that you are able to manage your resources to gain this power and strength to move you to the next level. I think you will combine the avoiders and the spenders.
Okay.
I see them sort of struggling in some same direction, one leading to the other.
Exactly. So the spender, as we said, they find their joy in overspending. They are triggered. They are triggers of spending. And their point of coming to themselves and solving the problem of spending is looking, what triggers me to overspend? And that will come from their habits or their struggles. It can be self-esteem, that I enjoy when I'm dining or having fun with friends and I can be able to spend. I enjoy when I can buy myself a nice suit. I enjoy when I can take myself out for a vacation. I enjoy when I'm dishing out money to friends and relatives to show them that I've made it. So when they realize what is a trigger? Is it self-esteem issue? Is it a sense of belonging? Is it to find joy and peace or a place of belonging? They're able to sort out that. The avoider is a person who is living in denial. Again, as you say, they're in debt issue, they are in money issue that they are struggling and they are aware, but they do not want to call themselves into a meeting. The meeting of myself, me, myself, and I.
Yes.
And to sit down and to see, where am I? Is this worth living, or can I call myself to order and to see, I need to get out of this. I need help. Just raise your hand if you're sinking in that swimming pool and say, I need help. And, it can be your partner, a friend, your wife, your people that you work with. It can be a financial consultant to tell you, this is the way to get out of debt. Probably to change the car that you have, probably to change the house that you live in, probably to change that liability and just, cut it off. Probably to renegotiate your debt that you have with the bank or with whoever you owe. You can ask for a moratorium. The other debts that actually you can go and tell, that those people that are in this situation, how do we renegotiate? They can give a discount, or you can have a journey of how to pay. There are two ways that, there are two highly recommended ways, especially if you're in debt, that we usually call the snowball effect. The snowball strategy, where you're saying, let me pay debts from the smallest as I gather the momentum and I'm able to clear everything. So you can be able to get advice or help from different people who can tell you, this is the way to walk out of the challenges that you have. So it just needs acknowledge that I'm in problems and I need help.
Okay. And I think for these people, the biblical principle that comes to mind is planning. And Luke chapter 14, verse 28 to 30, tells us, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish." And then, the passage continues.
Yes.
But basically, we are telling this person that they need to learn to take charge of money. Money is already in charge of them,
Yeah.
Especially if you are a spender. And now it is also seated on you, now that you don't have and you're already an avoider.
Yeah.
You've already gotten yourself into debts. And for both, the principle actually works for both, just as you said. For the spender is really sitting down and planning and saying, I'm going to live within a certain plan. You can actually have money and you don't have to spend it simply because
You had a plan.
you had a plan. This is not how you had planned to talk about. And I know at some point in another episode, we'll be talking about budgeting. And we will also go into talking about the issue of debt in more detail and how to overcome. But for today, we are saying for the floater, for the daredevil, for the spender, for the avoider, we are saying learn to put up with the seasons of life, and that is contentment. But we are also saying learn to be effective or efficient with your money, and that is stewardship. And finally, we are saying learn to take charge of money, and that is planning. This has been Connect, where we go beyond Sunday. Let us know how you are managing your money struggles and how else we can be of help to you to help you in this journey of becoming financially healthy. God bless you.